Welcome to the Carter Center's Forum on Human Rights. My name is Josh Griffin. I'm a graduate assistant with the Human Rights Program. During this live roundtable conversation, we will discuss the personal impact of attending the 57th anniversary on the March on Washington in 2020. Myself, a returned Peace Corps volunteer, Zach Schreiner, will share what motivated us to attend this historic event. We'll recount the speeches we heard and describe how these speeches motivated us to continue to get in good trouble and fight for social justice. This conversation aims to inspire and encourage people like yourself to attend this year's March on Washington on August 28th and take action for social justice in your own life. During this conversation, we hope you, our audience, will share your personal point of view and experience on advocating for social justice in our live chat. Forum members may contribute comments and questions during the event. To join, please complete the form under Join the Community at the top of this page. Joining us today, we have Zach Schreiner. As previously mentioned, Zach is returned Peace Corps volunteer of Mali and Morocco. He holds a BA in political communication from the University of Northern Iowa and is an Eagle Scout. For much of last summer, Zach witnessed firsthand social justice activism throughout Washington, D.C. Thank you, Zach, for joining us. I think you're muted.
I think I'm muted too.
It's all good.
Thanks for having me on, Josh. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Thank you. So in order to set the scene, I'm going to read an excerpt from a mutual friend of ours named Michael Tarazi, who also attended this event. And I really think he captured what it was like to be there in a few words. So Mike writes, on August 28th, 2020, I snuck away from my desk today to take part in the march at Lincoln Memorial. I saw crowds of people sweating in the sun, covered with their face masks. The National Guardmen on the Metro, the t-shirt sellers underneath their awnings. I heard Breonna Taylor's name recited like a prayer, and I added my own silent name of prayers for her and Trayvon Martin, and for so many others. By the reflecting pool of the Lincoln Memorial, we witnessed firsthand, we are stood there with thousands of others. So as I read those words and as I see these pictures, I get goosebumps. What comes to mind for you, Zach?
What I remember about that day was the large amount of people that were there, and they held up signs about being from all over the country. They were bussed in from Atlanta, from New York, people as far away from us as California. I remember a large group of folks were waving Puerto Rican flags. And what struck me was listening to and reading accounts of the first march in 1963 about how similar this march last year was to that. Both were galvanized by unjust killings of young Black men. And in 2020's case, it was George Floyd. In 1963, it was Emmett Till. Both were a culmination of a lot of hard work by many different organizations. In 1963, it was this coalition of civil rights organizations, labor unions, and a lot of clergy as well from all over the country. And in 2020, it was much the same organizations and in many cases, a lot of the same people. That's what I recall. And witnessing and being a part of it and swallowing it all in and and being present in the moment that we were there for. And Mike was exactly right. It was very hot.
Yeah, right. And at the same time, though, there was a pandemic going on, which there is still a pandemic, and we still came together and risked our lives and our health for that moment in time. If I remember
Right.
correctly. Yeah.
And you can see in the pictures, but everybody you see is wearing a mask. And that was very important to me that I saw that. But I think that goes to seek a broader point, right? Is that people were willing and able. They took all the proper precautions. Everyone had everything, as safe as they could be, and then they let their voice be heard. I think that's very powerful. Look at how many people are there, and look at how many people were there in '63, and
Right.
and just the sheer amount of people and it's just amazing. It's incredible how many people.
No, it is. It's incredible, but I think it also speaks to the ongoing struggle to be a minority in this country.
Right.
57 years later, you know, we're still being brutalized and beat in the streets like they were way back then, and still fighting. So, you know, we come to this holy place, as I call it, this Mecca, in a sense, to stand up and to speak. And when will it end? When will we, you know, not have to come back to this place?
Right.
I wonder. And then how do we continue when you do show up and you stand up and you join this fight? How do you continue that after the facts? Is there anything that you continue to do, knowing that, you know, it's a year ago you went? Like, how do you continue to, you know, fight the good fight and get in good trouble?
I think that, and good trouble is a good word. I like that word.
Yeah.
And I think it's to kind of, I'll go off of that and I'll come back to the point that you made, which is, you know, John Lewis was only 23 when he spoke in 1963. You know, and I think that having a realization that it doesn't matter who you are or how old you are or what your level of education is or anything like that. If you see injustice in action at a time of injustice, is condemnation of that violence. You are admitting you are okay with that injustice if you sit on the sidelines and don't do anything. You have got to act. You have to. And I think that was something that a lot of people took out of a lot of the protests last year, was I think that a lot of people realized that what we were taught growing up was not true. I think that the March in '63 sometimes is misunderstood as this climax that led to the signing of the Civil Rights Act, and then everything was fixed and everything was okay. That is absolutely not true. It could not be further from it. That was the start, and not even the start. It was one of the starting discussions that we need to have in this country about how to move forward and how people of different races in this country can continue to coexist. And I think that they can. I think we prove that every day. But the fact is not everyone's getting a fair shake. And I think that participating in things like this and mass movements is important because it lets people know that their ideas that, man, a lot of this doesn't feel like it's fair. It validates a lot of those feelings. Does that make sense? Am I coming across there?
No, it does. Absolutely. So yeah, in preparation, you know, for this roundtable, I sat and I kind of thought about, you know, what it meant to me to attend this event. And, you know, I'm somewhat of a writer, and so I wrote, on Wednesday, August 28th, 1963, is estimated that 250,000 people attended the March on Washington. The purpose of that march was to advocate for civil rights and economic rights of African Americans. It is during this march that Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech. On Friday, August 28th, 2020, I stood amongst thousands at the Lincoln Memorial. I heard Martin Luther King III give a speech. I saw and heard Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter speak. It was in this moment that I realized that this is bigger than me. That the 57th March on Washington is ensuring that we not only keep Dr. King's dream alive, but we as a society actively and consciously build a nation where all people have the resources and ability to live purposefully and dignified lives. And so I think that is why you continue to go back, because that dream hasn't been achieved yet. And to be there and to stand and take this picture amongst thousands of people and to be feet away from the speakers, that's when I knew I have to continue to fight the good fight and get in good trouble always. And it's just something to be said when you're amongst like-minded people passionately advocating for social justice. It just encourages you to continue, no matter what, in my personal opinion there. But Zach, I want to ask a follow-up question to you, kind of related to positionality and how you and I both show up in the world. So, How did your positionality influence your reasoning for attending this march?
I think it's important that anyone in a position of power, and I am well aware I'm a white man in this country, in America, that I do hold a position of privilege. And I think it's extremely important that people who hold those positions acknowledge that and work on understanding what that means and what their role is in understanding oppression in this country. A lot of the time, that's all it is. Jumping in and trying to worry about, well, what can I do? That's not always the right move. A lot of the times it's sitting and listening. A lot of the times it's going to a march and listening to Dr. King's granddaughter, who's a preteen, give a very eloquent speech and allow her to have that platform. And once again, to listen to what she says and how we should move forward on that. That I think is at least where I'm coming from that. And of course, I can only speak from my own positionality in our society.
And for people who might have the same intersectionalities as you, what would you say to them if they're thinking and contemplating if I should go or not? What would you?
Absolutely. It's not a question of if you should. You need to.
Why? Why should they go?
It is imperative. It is imperative. If you, like I said earlier, if you are witnessing oppression, and that is exactly what we all witnessed last year, multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, who was shot 7 times in the back 1 week before we were in Washington at that march.
I remember his dad and sister both spoke too.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You cannot witness that, acknowledge that it's wrong,
yes,
and then do nothing. You cannot do that. That is absolutely not an option.
For sure.
There are a dozen things. If you were immunocompromised, there were a lot of things you could have done. Even with that, you could have given out water. They were taking donations of all kinds, bail bonds, the whole 9 yards. There was a lot that could have been done.
Yeah.
And a lot was done. I don't want to dissuade what was done.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that as someone who holds a position of power in society,
mm-hmm.
you must acknowledge that power that you have
mm-hmm.
and how best to use it in order to create a more equal and just society.
I couldn't agree more. I'm a biracial male that's Black whose father was born in 1947 and grew up in the Jim Crow South. He told me stories of drinking from Black-only water fountains. One of his childhood friends was actually murdered by the Ku Klux Klan for whistling at a white lady. My mother's from Seattle. I was born in Virginia, but grew up in Seattle. When I got older, my mother told me we moved from Virginia because she was tired of being called the N-lover and was scared that she'd commit acts of violence towards the racist perpetrators if we stayed living in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So much of my existence has been shaped by racism and bigotry. Why I've been heavily involved in social justice activism is because my mother instilled in me to always stand up for what I believe in. I refuse to sit down, and I refuse to stay silent, and I refuse to live a passive life. So attending last summer's march on Washington, it wasn't a matter of if, it's a matter of it's part of my DNA to fight for what I believe in.
Right.
And I believe in fighting for social justice with all my heart. And I just can't implore you enough, as Zach was saying, if you are, wondering if I should go or not, if you have the means to, absolutely. It's a special, magical event, almost going to church or a holy place, if you have an opportunity, to say the least. Do you have any other thoughts on that topic? Right?
Well, it's interesting you say it's going to a holy place, and I think that where the march took place in both instances, in 1963 and last year in 2020, I think that is a hallowed ground in this country, and it's important, and the symbolism is important at that time too, and it's that way for multiple reasons. It's obviously the national capital. It's the mall, which there's not really anybody, there's no other country that really does this, that has this very large open area in their national capital next to all of their official buildings, with all of these monuments. And it's almost as if it's designed for a symbolic, to be a symbolic place. And I think that it is hallowed ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that way before the '63 march, and it's that way after, obviously. There's a plaque where Dr. King gave his speech.
Yeah.
On those steps.
Yes. And
what struck me was, I remember coming home that evening,
mm-hmm.
and you mentioned Dr. King's granddaughter. I think I did too.
Yeah.
And what struck me was, at that time, the Civil War was only 100 years old.
Mm-hmm.
As we stood there, it was 150, 160 years old.
Yes.
Dr. King's granddaughter, that's 3 generations.
Mm-hmm.
From once the Civil Rights Act was passed. The problem of racial inequality in this country is not a 3-generation problem. That is something that's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a very long time. We've made a lot of progress, but it's going to take this time, and it's going to take a lot of education, and it's going to take moving in the right direction for a long time. And it's not going to have an end date. We don't know what that's going to look like. But I can tell you I can tell you what it doesn't look like. And what it doesn't look like is someone being choked to death on the ground saying, "I can't breathe." That's not right.
Yeah.
Sorry to kind of.
No, don't be sorry. No, you're being truthful. I think that's the reality. This nation is, Black people and minorities have always been oppressed in this country, and we keep going back. This summer we're going back August 28th. It's a Saturday to fight for voting rights, because throughout this country they're passing voter suppression laws, and so it's interesting when here in Georgia they can have their first Black senator, but now different individuals in position of prominence and power come together to pass laws and write laws at a state capitol where the portrait behind them is of a plantation, and all those men happen to be at the top of the patriarchy. Right. So that's intentional. So how do we change it, right? How do we continually to take intentional actions each and every day to make changes so that we don't have to continue to go back to this holy place, this hallowed grounds? It's just like, they say Lincoln freed the slaves, but are we free? Being Black, I'm biracial, but being Black in America and being 6'3" and having tattoos on a street by yourself with the police can make you become, too many names on a t-shirt. And right. So how do we recondition society how do we recondition society to understand the Black experience and not have that be my burden? How do we have it be the people who are in those positions of prominence be their burden, right? If you say my struggle is your struggle, then okay, be about it each and every day. Show up when it matters. Attend marches. Speak out. It's like you and I were talking yesterday, and I equate this to basketball or just a sport, right? And it's like you want to get in the game. Well, don't ask the coach to put you into the game. Just go play the game. If you got to hack and you got to foul, do whatever you got to do, because this has been 400 years of oppression. We're tired of it. Help us not have to continue to struggle.
Right.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Right now, I really want to look at these different photos from 2020 and the original March on Washington, just to see the similarities in them, just to see the scale, and just to see how many people were there. So I believe we have similar pictures of the reflection pool,
Yeah,
See,
right there.
this was last summer,
Right.
right? 2020. And I believe we have one from 1963
Yeah, right
right
there.
here.
That's really,
Similar. Yeah.
that's striking.
And what's interesting is that I know that there's other images from this original March on Washington where people were standing in the reflection pool. I don't know if you remember, Zach, but when we were at those steps and we were hearing the people give the speeches, I believe we both looked back and we saw a line of people standing in the reflection pool, holding hands together with their hands above their head, unified, right? And that's what it takes. That's what it takes.
Right.
A bridge over troubled water, as they might say.
That's a good way of putting that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
I think that, and it goes back to this being hallowed ground and the proper place to have a peaceful protest like this. And you can see in these images how many people were there. And what strikes me is that you're exactly right. It's that it's coming together and forming a bridge over the reflecting pool. It's seeing people on the steps, or in the grass around there. It goes to show how many people are behind this. And I think the other important part is, part of the theory of nonviolence is that you show how many people, you physically show how many people are willing to show up, right? You physically, by showing up and doing something like that and putting yourself on camera, what you're showing is what you're showing to everybody at home, or on Facebook or what have you. You're showing to all of them, like, no, I care this much. This isn't sharing an image on Facebook. This is not tuning in and commenting on the nightly news. This is you physically in a place, right? And adding your particular value in this planet, in this country, to this message, which is that Black Lives Matter and we demand equality.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And like when I look at this picture right here, at one point myself and somebody walked up the right side,
right,
made my way to the top. And in this picture, I believe Al Sharpton might be speaking, but I want to talk about when I was in Barbados in 2013, and this will come full circle. I saw them read the verdict in the George Zimmerman trial, and we all know he got off, and that was the trial in which he murdered Trayvon Martin. And at this March on Washington, I stood 10 feet away from Trayvon Martin as she stood out and looked at thousands of people. We heard Jacob Blake's dad give a speech and go ahead and say every officer that shot his son was guilty. We saw George Floyd's his brother speak.
He broke down.
He did break down.
Right.
And it's just, how many more names, right? How many more names will it take you who's watching to get involved? Because the only way we're going to end this is as a collective,
right,
of unity and love and advocating for Black lives, for equality for all peoples, because we have to. If we really want to live out, the creed of this country, as Martin said in his speech, we have to come together. We have the ability to stop these killings, to stop the economic oppression, to stop the healthcare oppression, the socioeconomic oppressions. It's on us, the common people, because this is our nation.
Right.
The government's of the people, for the people. It's our nation. So we have the power to change that.
That's right.
Definitely.
I couldn't have put it better myself.
Are there any speeches that stood out to you in particular?
I think, I recall after the end, I think when Al Sharpton was done, you had mentioned the family members of a lot of the slain spoke. If you need convincing to go to a march or a protest or what have you, I want you to watch those speeches. You have to. Those we're all victims to a certain extent of an oppressive society, but those people end up getting the tip of that spear, and they're the ones who end up suffering the most, because It's their family who died. It's their family who, oppression literally killed. Okay? A piece of them was taken away. And I think that going back and listening to that, I even mentioned, George Floyd's brother broke down. He could not finish what he was saying. He couldn't, because it was so emotionally draining to do that. Imagine having to do that over and over and over again. He's got to go on television and do that. He's got to go on radio and do that. He's got to talk to every news reporter he can find. And he's going to relive this trauma of his brother choking to death in the middle of the street in broad daylight. How many times do we have to do this? How many more families have to be broken because of this? It doesn't have to happen. I don't want to have to go marching again. I don't want to do that. I want to stay at home and drink tea, but I can't do that. It's made impossible by the system of oppression that we have in this country. And you're exactly right. The only people who can change it are us. It's in no one else's interest to change it. It is in no one else's interest for the status quo to change, other than those who are actively being crushed by systemic racism. That's it.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I don't know if I can talk, if I've got much more to say. It's as simple as that.
It's as simple
as listening to this, you have got to get involved. There's no other option.
Yeah. I mean, as we mentioned kind of yesterday, and then got a couple more minutes left, is that by choosing not to get involved is a form of violence in itself.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And you can't let the bystander effect take a hold of you. You have got to run out and do something.
Absolutely.
And don't think that you doing something will make it worse. 9 times out of 10, you're not. And don't worry if you are. Someone will tell you.
Yeah. No, definitely.
And just listen when they do.
Yeah. No, definitely. Build community with those who respect you and one another, who value you. I think we'd be remiss not to mention that, we ended this day by walking from the Lincoln Memorial and walking to the White House. And there they had the massive guardrails up.
Right.
But I want to focus on the fact, not the Black Lives Matter Plaza, but all the faces up there that were lost to police brutality. Hundreds of faces whose families weren't up there that did not speak. So please get involved. Zach, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
My only final thought is, thank you for having me on. This is a pleasure to have and to be a part of. If you are listening to this, if you happen to see this months, years later, please, I implore you, find an activist event happening near you and go. Just go. Bring some water, bring some friends. Just go, please. I'm begging you here. And I shouldn't have to do it, but it's the situation we find ourselves in. Mask up, get some hand sanitizer, and brave the elements. I believe in you, and you should believe in yourself as well.
Well said. Well said. Be sure to stay hydrated. But I want to give a special thank you to Matthew Crichton and Michael Tarazi for providing us with pictures they both took during this march. I also want to thank our audience for joining us and contributing to the conversation. Not much was said here, but that's okay. I hope that you had a conversation within yourself to see what you can do to get involved in this year's march. If you're able to attend this year's march on Washington, as Zach and I have done before, we please implore you to go. Be safe. COVID's still real. Wear your masks, your hand sanitizer. Stay hydrated. But I need to admit that none of these roundtables that I've done would be possible if it wasn't without the support of my supervisors, Laura Olson and Karen Ryan. I thank you very much for just giving me this opportunity to be able to put these together. The person I really need to thank the most is Jason Parker. He runs all the production side of the roundtables, and without him, I couldn't have done any of these roundtables. It's been a pleasure working with you and developing these roundtables. Lastly, but not least, I hope you all continually fight for what you believe in forever. You have the ability to create change. Don't listen to anybody tell you what you can't do. Look at your reflection, know that you can do it because you have to. It's been a pleasure to hold space with you all over the course of 5 roundtables. I wish you all a good night, and I hope to see you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.